I don't know. Does it sound like vibe coding? Would you call it vibe coding?
Something like more than half the people who use OpenAI already think that they're generating ads and showing ads.
It's not that easy to sell into Fortune 100s.
No.
Welcome back to Call Me Data.
Hey, morning, David. Welcome back to yet another episode of Call Me Data.
Yeah, good to see you again, Peter.
Absolutely.
And we have a guest here.
We do.
Erik Wildt is joining us, and we'll talk in a minute about what Erik does in his day-to-day life. But thanks for being here.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Yes.
And yeah, let's jump into it. So let me introduce you before we get too far into this, Erik.
Sure.
So Erik and I have known each other for a little while. Erik, you have a company that works in, I guess, healthcare and enterprise data management. We're going to talk. I want to hear some of your stories from the trenches about the data management stuff you do. But and I also want to ask you about the tagline for your company, which is "Data Chaos Conquered," right? So we'll come back to that because I'm curious to hear about it. But maybe before we jump into our main topics for today, we should do our usual roundup of what caught your eye in the news or in the press in the last few days.
It is always something that catches my eye in the press. Like you, we exchange these things, I feel like 5 times a day.
Yeah.
But the new OpenAI Atlas browser and some of its, I know we beat up on OpenAI last time, but I feel like some of the beat up is warranted. Yet again, we're going to do a minor beat up on their browser, which is, we think it's interesting. But you have some real concerns about the privacy aspect of it.
I do, because it does something different. Have you used any of these browsers like Comet from Perplexity or Atlas from OpenAI?
Not yet.
Okay, so OpenAI is like the latest in what seem to be a whole series of different AI-powered browsers, and they're all trying to replace browsing with having AI deeply embedded in the browser. So the idea is instead of going to a bunch of websites and doing stuff, you just make a request and it sort of transparently brings up websites, compiles information off multiple websites, so you could like do comparison shopping or something. But there is something really different about Atlas, which was just announced last week from OpenAI, and that is, according to their privacy policy, they actually keep and retain and scrape not just your interactions with the websites, but the actual content of the websites that they're looking at. So that's a little scary to me because you actually could be shopping, or you could be logging into your bank account, or I don't know what you could be doing. And this could, in theory, all be stored in OpenAI servers. Now, in their defense, right?
Small defense.
Yeah, they do give you an option on a per website basis to say, do not track the contents of this website. I don't know
how many people are going to know it's even there or use it or totally forget about it. My gut is most people are just going to continue browsing, not realizing that all their information is being tracked, good, bad, or ugly, and it's going to show up as part of the next search.
Here's the crazy thing, though. I think you and I think about this as a privacy-minded people. Do you know anyone who uses Life 360 or any of the tracking apps on their phones, like young people?
Yeah, I just learned about it. My sister was in town and yeah, they were talking about it. I didn't get it. I didn't learn a lot about it, but yeah.
And so I read an article this morning saying, like, amongst people in their 20s who are new to the working world, they still use Life 360. They use it on each other. They track themselves each other as friends. And when someone said to them, like, what about the invasion of privacy? Their response was like, who cares? Like, how do you know someone's safe? So like they've, just because of the way social media works and everything else works, that they've sort of been growing up in a world where they surrender their privacy to share.
They have no concept. For them, it's easy for them to share their information. But the other thing troubling about this browser, which I think has gone a little bit more unspoken about, is now, like Google, they can start using this for delivering ads.
Sure.
Which I'm sorry, that to me is just like, I won't use OpenAI if they start delivering ads on these things. But they did an internal study and they thought something like more than half the people who use OpenAI already think that they're generating ads and showing ads. So
they might
that
as well
to
do
me
it, I guess, if they're already being
but that's also to me quite troubling if you're going to start generating advertisements and putting them on OpenAI. That to me is just wrong. I'm sorry, it's full stop. That to me is a reason to not use it.
Right.
So
we
I'll
did
beat
talk
up on
about
it a little
the
bit harder.
integration of OpenAI with Walmart and shopping.
Right, we did.
And that's terrifies me.
But not like the generation of ads, much like Google does when they started generating advertisements based on your history.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I have a problem with it. Now they're becoming a search company.
A little bit scary. All right. The other one that, Erik, I think you wanted to mention, which I think is a really fascinating story, is the story of, is it Tilly Norwood? Is that
Tilly Norwood? Yeah.
We did talk about her on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. Her, it, them, whatever you refer to an AI generated actor as. But I think you probably have a little bit different take on it because you have some toes in that industry. So tell us
Sure.
tell us about your involvement in that industry, and I'd love to hear what you think about this.
Absolutely. Yeah. So on the side, I do work on film and TV shows, background acting. And I know that the big SAG strike that we had, I think a year and a half ago, a big part of that was AI and how that's going to influence things. And then seeing, this Tilly Norwood situation kind of heated things up again. But at the same time, when you're on a TV set or a film set, there's a lot of time wasted trying to figure out the shots.
Right.
And it seemed to me that, using an AI capability of some kind, maybe not a single person, but so you have the storyboard of a show or a movie, and then you turn that into an actual production. And I think, in between storyboard and production, you could use AI to optimize, okay, this is how I really want to do the shot. Because I've been on sets where it takes forever.
Oh, interesting.
They're like, well, let's try it this way now.
Right.
Or they could try it this way with AI.
So they could sort of render the shot virtually,
Right.
decide how it looks, and then commit to the actual physical shot.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I've been on shoots that it's 5 days for a 10-minute shoot, 10 minutes of
Right.
final footage.
Right.
5 days.
Okay, that gets expensive. I could see
that gets expensive, but I could see at some point, or maybe do you see at some point everything completely rendered by AI? Because you could prompt these things to be fairly accurate
Right.
on the scenes that they generate. And to me, that seems much simpler than, I don't know, taking up a street in Manhattan and getting it all set up and have 50 people here running a shot when you can have somebody sitting in an office going, I want the scene to look like this. Can we render it 50 different ways?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's the worst, being in Manhattan, and maybe you've walked across the
100 times I've seen it.
Like,
Exactly.
no, you got to cross the street. It's
Right.
like, yeah, I live here. So, yeah, I think there could be some way to balance that all out. I just think at the very least, it could, reduce the amount of time spent to get that necessary footage.
I agree.
Which would be interesting because then it actually lowers the cost of having human actors on set because you don't need them there for 5 days for a 10-minute.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting. All right. So my question to you then, Erik, is if they decide sometime in the near future that Tilly Norwood needs a male counterpart, how much would you charge them to license your likeness? And it's a semi-serious question. Like, do you think we'll get to the point where people say, yeah, for a certain price, I'll be happy to let you use my likeness. I'll help you train an AI model and you can use a digital version of me in film. Would you even consider that?
Sure. I think I would consider it. I mean, it's hard to know what am I giving up by doing that.
Right.
But I guess you get to sleep in and you could stay home and drink
my
coffee.
AI is working.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I'm sure if somebody goes, Tom Cruise said, Tom, by the way, here's $250 million. We're going to, borrow your image to go create another movie. Tom would sign up for that.
Yeah, his stunt work is taking a toll on him. So.
Yeah, it's a 60-something-year-old body. I'm sure he would sign up for that in a nanosecond.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that's interesting because maybe it'll put stuntmen out of work if they could do digital recreations of stunts. Yep. You never know.
You never know. Hey,
very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on the Tilly Norwood situation. Had she been in anything? Have you ever seen any footage of Tilly Norwood? By the way, I've never seen it.
Not yet. No.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just more of a news.
Yeah.
And there were pictures of her render. They had some shorts I saw that were, and they were very realistic. It looked really good. It's getting really good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, we've created some training materials that have digital avatars of ourselves, and it's frightening how
good they are actually. And it's frightening how good they're actually getting. And to generate it on the fly, it's just amazing how good this stuff is actually getting. I'm in awe.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. All right, well, let's talk about you for a minute, Erik.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about TeloChain, right? That's your company.
TeloChain, yeah.
TeloChain. I'm sorry, I should have rehearsed the pronunciation. My bad.
Yeah, no sweat.
But tell me a little bit about what you guys do, and then we'll talk about how that relates to data and AI.
Sure. Yeah, so the principals, Young Lee and myself, we founded it in 2006. She and I both worked in the credit card industry in Wilmington, Delaware, prior to that. And so my work had been since the late 90s in data analytics, data processing, a lot of SQL, SAS programming language, and, shell scripting, Perl scripting. Young's work has been more actually in using tools like artificial neural networks, and Monte Carlo.
Right.
And what was the other one she mentioned? Oh, Markov chain. So
Okay.
doing things like optimizing loan loss reserves. So optimizing loan loss reserves for the bank, because if you have too much in reserve, you're missing out on investment.
Right, missing opportunities. Yep.
Right, but if you don't have enough, all kinds of
Then the
problems.
Fed comes looking for you.
Yeah, you got to have
So
it.
it sounds like she has a similar background to what Peter used to do, and
Yeah.
you and I have a similar background in terms of what we used to do.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Good.
So yeah, so we've had these experiences, and then I founded it on my own, and then she joined me shortly after.
Okay.
But the idea was to bring these capabilities to smaller companies. Right. And initially it was with a private equity firm. And then later we got brought into a large health insurer.
Good.
And, it's just, it's always the same thing that, there is all this data, and there needs to be ways to get humans out of the loop as much as possible where it makes sense, and then bring them back in where it also makes sense.
So let me ask you a question. When you started out, back in 06, this wasn't a common thing necessarily to hire somebody to do data engineering type work.
Right.
Analytics was really, for most companies, very much in its infancy.
Yes.
How did you get an entree into some of these places?
Good question. So we worked with, when we were at one of the credit card companies in Delaware, the head of database marketing
Right.
had moved to work at that New York hedge fund. So he brought us in. Well, he brought me into that, and then he's brought us into other opportunities.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it's not that easy to sell into Fortune 100s.
No, I know. That's why I asked the
It's an-
question, especially at a time when it just really wasn't very common to do this type of work.
Yeah, exactly.
Really interesting. I mean, so one of the things you and I've chatted about before is that, like, large or small, a lot of the challenges are the same, right? Like data challenges, data hygiene, things like that. Are you finding that to be true? Like, as you work with like mid-market companies, do they have the same types of data challenges that, banks that we're used to have? All of us are used to banks in some way.
Absolutely. I think the challenge is sometimes it's just a matter of knowing how to work with growing data sets. So, but generally there's also data quality issues, and then the idea of having to blend different, disparate sources of data. I think any growing company at some point, they all started using Excel. In the beginning, and then if they're successful enough, Excel becomes a choke point for their operations. It's not really a data warehouse.
Right.
And are you finding that a lot of these companies are sort of running their business on Excel and small databases, where a larger company might have dedicated application databases and things like that?
100%. Yeah. That's how it goes. And, we were working on a opportunity it was a private equity backed collection of fertility clinics, and essentially at the top, it's a roll up. So at the top company, the finance team had to just keep fighting with the data in Microsoft Excel, and just adding more and more finance people to do. And it's not work that anyone wants to do.
Right.
No, of course not. Yeah.
Longing data in Excel. So
no. And the problem I see, I mean, we've seen this at large companies, is a lot of times the finance organization, that is, to your point, that's where all the data comes together.
Right.
That's where the flaws that are inherent in the data start to show up. And so before they can, close the books or whatever they're doing, they have to remediate those data issues. But the problem is they'll spend a lot of time doing that grunt work that no one wants to do. And at the end of the day, now you've got the finance view of the world with the data that they cleaned up, and you've got the data that's still sitting in the original spreadsheets or applications.
There's never a source of truth anyplace.
Right.
Everybody's got their own source of truth.
Right.
Those words out.
Yeah.
So yes, you have these arguments about what really happened.
Right.
Right, exactly. So it sounds like it's a lot of the same problems that we used to see on the enterprise scale, just maybe smaller scale.
Right.
Do you think mid-sized companies, though, have less data? Or how would you describe that? Like, I could see an argument where they maybe have fewer copies of the data, but do they actually have like smaller volumes?
I think, I mean, when you're talking about, say, an alternative lender, they're going to have a certain amount of data, and then versus a credit card issuer with 25 million cardholders and 3 years of transactions.
which is a lot of data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for sure, but I think, when you don't solve that data management problem and that single source of truth problem, then it becomes the limiter of the overall growth of the business. Because they get to that point where it's too big for what they can handle, and they start having service delivery failures and other problems.
Yeah.
So walk me through just a small organization brings you in the door and it's, Erik, we're throwing our hands up in the air. Please help us. What do we do next? We have all this spreadsheet information all over the place, and they don't have any relational databases in place, have nothing there. Like, what do you do? How do you get them on board that this has to be done so they can continue to grow and manage all this information much more effectively?
Right. So, I mean, that's one of the main things is they need to really want it, because organizations will put up with that pain for a long, long time.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. But when they see that, this is the limiting, factor of our whole company and our ability to double, triple, then it starts to make sense to make those investments. And so for the way I like to start is to see what kind of reports, say, the finance team is using, since they're usually the ones paying us, and, understand what they're doing and understand what are the raw data feeds coming in. And so there's that middle part where they're munging up the data and preparing it. And that's really what we would pull into the relational database.
Okay. So if you can streamline that piece and
Right.
sort of clarify, rationalize all that data manipulation going on,
Right.
then you sort of, I guess, get to unlock more value. Are you seeing these companies, is AI becoming a driver for them to want to finally tackle some of these data problems, or haven't they made that connection yet between cause and effect?
Yeah, I don't think they see that idea that if they could use AI on their internal data,
Right.
The opportunities to really optimize. I'm not seeing that yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we see a lot of the same thing. People are like,
Right.
well, why is my AI initiative struggling? Why can't I come up with something really unique and different to do? And yet they haven't been able to get their hands on enough high quality data of their own to actually train an AI model or create an AI
Right.
solution that's tailored to their specific business. And
Right. Right. No, exactly.
so it's a hard one.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, from maturity level, you have these small orgs and you're dealing with the
Mhm.
finance folks. Are they even thinking that far ahead in terms of using all this information that you've now cleaned up for them for AI or for just even more basic analytics to help grow the
Yeah.
business?
No,
Uh,
I think they're just, they want to get these reports out to regulatory agencies out. They want
Right.
to, they just don't want to have to fight with the data anymore. But I believe that is a very strong selling point, that now you have this kind of foundation that you can use AI capabilities for, but it's more of a vitamin than a painkiller.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
it is.
It's,
Yes.
it's a good way of looking at it. I was just in my head trying to think of, like, there is this hierarchy of needs there, right? And everyone wants to, like, make the pain stop first.
Right.
Right.
Then you'll worry about, like, improving your health over time. But interesting. But it's actually, I think what's powerful is if you can connect for them that the same work that you're doing that stops the pain also creates that longer term health, the ability to leverage their data in different ways and apply AI and things like that.
Yes.
So
So
interesting.
are you even seeing, so a lot of these small companies, I mean, one thing we speak about often is just that AI is a force multiplier for a small organization. You're effectively getting, I don't want to say free people, but you could use it to grow your business without adding additional headcount. Are they even there mentally? Like, are they even thinking about it that way, other than creating images for advertising or chatbots or whatever? But they really thinking about how they can grow their business with this new data that you've just spent months cleaning up for them? Or they're not just mentally, again, just they don't have their heads wrapped around it yet?
So far, they're not really having their heads wrapped around it. But I think once you have that data and they start to see what's possible,
Right.
kind of like with software development, you give them some kind of a version of the software, and then they say,
Right.
well, could you do this? Could you do that?
Right.
And so I think it's kind of a crossing the chasm thing where
Mhm.
Right.
once they get to that, less pain point,
Yeah.
then you say, well, you could also, do these other optimizations.
So do you help them actually kind of, I don't know, kind of walk them down a journey of what it can, like what Nirvana is actually going to look like? Now that you have all
Yeah.
this great stuff ahead of you, in front of you.
Well, yeah, you can only go one or two steps ahead.
Right.
So there's kind of that continuum, where
Right.
there's the fully advanced companies and then pen and paper, and
Right.
But if
And I
you say,
guess-
yeah, you can get you over here, but they don't understand it,
Right.
then you're
Right.
just making things up.
It just seems like it's almost science fiction if you're giving them
Right.
like the end state vision, and they're like, I can't even imagine getting there. Like, how do we do that? Yeah.
It's not possible.
Well, the other thing that's really interesting to me is the idea that these organizations, and this could go from anyone from startups to fairly decent sized, mid-sized companies. The way that they deploy technology has changed so much in the last decade or two, right?
Mhm.
They go more towards software as a service. And a lot of times it seems like they have a lot smaller IT departments than large enterprises
Right.
do. How does that affect the work you do, or just in general, like their ability to manage their data and apply it?
Right. So that's what makes it possible for us to get in there. Because
Okay.
once you have those investments in IT and teams and all
Right.
that, then they'll just, even if we were to pitch them the idea, and
Right.
even if they couldn't actually do it with their own people, the likelihood is we'll get kiboshed, behind the scenes. Whereas if it's the finance team and they're feeling the pain, and we can talk to the CFO because they're
Right.
not a huge
Right.
organization, then we can make headway.
Yeah, I guess
So-
if they have a large IT organization, there's a little bit of a fixed cost, and
Right.
they need to use that cost base.
So are we saying IT is an impediment? It's never the case.
Peter said it. I
It's
didn't say it.
possible. Never the case. Ever. No,
I
never.
would never say anything.
Send your complaints to Peter.
But we know it is. That's not a
It can
question. I
be.
mean, it can be. Occasionally, it can be a facilitator, but more often than not, it becomes.
that is a great segue, because one of the things I did want to talk to you about when we were chatting before
Mhm.
is you've been working with some really interesting technologies and tools,
Right.
and I love the idea that maybe at a certain size, companies are more able to take advantage of some of the really cool new tools that are being released or have been released in the last several years
Right.
that large enterprises just won't touch. There's probably a bunch of reasons they
Right.
won't touch them, but like at the end of the day, we all know how hard it is to try to get any new technology or any new vendor
Oh, it's impossible.
introduced into an enterprise. It's very, very,
Very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and therefore, I don't know. Tell me if you agree with this. I feel like to some degree, large enterprises are sort of shut out from participating in some of the coolest, most interesting new pieces of technology around data and AI and app dev that maybe smaller organizations can take advantage of. Does your experience bear that out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think.
Okay.
I mean, if you're working at a large organization like that, you could
Right.
develop your own skills, as a personal project. But as far as incorporating that into a large organization, if you're a large enterprise organization, everything has to kind of be calcified to maximize the flow
I
rate
like
of
that
business.
word. That's a perfect word.
Yeah.
It sums up IT at most organizations.
Calcified. Yeah.
It just has to be that way. It has to be
Well,
these.
does it have to be? I know I asked the question because I'm always questioning. Does it have to really be that way? It's just control.
Yeah.
It has to be industrialized. Whether or not it has to be calcified is a
It can be
different.
industrialized, and it also can be innovative. I don't think they go hand in hand. They can go hand in hand. I just think most organizations choose not to.
And actually, I'm going to take back what I said about industrialization. So you've been in large organizations, we all have, and the mantra was always you had to build applications, robust, scalable, secure applications. And so we applied generally kind of a one size fits all methodology to how these apps were built and rolled out and
Right.
monitored. And I never gave it much thought. It seemed like, we're in a big, serious company. That's what we should do. And then I was at a bank years ago, and we were planning our cloud migration. And we got the inventory of, the 6,000 applications the bank had, or whatever the number, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Right.
And no one ever really paid much attention to anything beyond number 500 on that list before, right?
Right.
Well, we went through the rest of the 6,000, the other 5,500.
Right.
These were the most special purpose, single-used, narrowly defined applications. Some of them ran like once a quarter.
Right.
Right.
Of course.
And yet we spent millions of dollars on each of them, building them, deploying them, monitoring and managing
I know.
like they were just as important as the payment systems or accounting systems.
Right. Exactly.
And it struck me like that's a little bit crazy. Right.
But there's a one size fits all mentality in most enterprise firms.
Yeah.
And there are very few applications that need to be truly industrialized. Very, very few.
Right. You work on those.
Yes, those I've worked on. The trading systems, the global institutes for trade, financial systems, those need to be industrialized. Something that checks my time once a week, not industrializable. Doesn't need to be. You don't need to spend $1 million to keep time tracking going.
Yeah. All right. So if we think there's opportunity for, well, whether or not large enterprises would ever be able to take advantage of it, small companies seem to be taking advantage of these opportunities to build systems differently. Like, what are you seeing people use, or what do you use? I'm just curious. Like,
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so for the data aggregation and ELT work, extract, load, and transform, I use Snowflake database,
Okay.
and then I accompany that with the tool N8N, which they just had a huge funding round.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, those two are the main things, and then GitHub
Right.
to keep the code repository. But with those, with N8N, I can do all the work that I used to do with Perl scripting and shell scripting.
Right, a lot faster.
Yeah, a lot faster. I can put it together, and it's something that then I would be able to hand that off to a client's employee at some point. We're happy to do, maintain things for our clients, but if they want to take it over, that's part of our plan as well.
Now, do you use any of the AI tools, AI development tools, to make this go easier?
Absolutely. Yeah. Right now I'm using N8N MCP.
Oh, they have an MCP? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, you connected. So it's a GitHub repository that you connect to your Claude desktop and do a few steps to get it all working correctly. But with that, then, the things that I've done in the past that I know what I wanted to do, I can ask, Claude desktop, build me this workflow that does this, this, and this. And then, whereas if you can do the same thing without any of that, but you'll get.
Right. So Claude will actually generate N8N code?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
That's really cool.
I had no idea. Okay.
So it's an N8N created MCP server that you connect Claude to.
Right.
And then Claude learns how to, uses its tools to generate code. N8N
yes.
code.
To generate it's stuff that works. Because, if you look at an N8N workflow, it has all these different nodes.
Yeah, they're fairly hairy. I know. They're complex fast.
Yeah. And then, but if you do it without, say, the N8N MCP, you'll get these nodes that it's just a white square with a question mark.
Right.
Magic happens in this step.
It's all magic.
Yeah. So that tool has been fantastic to help me, pivot from what I used to use to using something.
Right. Now, does it save you a lot of time?
A lot of time.
Right.
Yeah. And it just helps, also saves me time in just understanding how everything works.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does it sound like vibe coding? Or would you call it vibe coding?
I think I would call it vibe coding.
Okay.
Yeah. From what I've seen, I mean, like I said, I have experience doing these types of tasks, but with other tools. And so being able to draw on that, but using N8N instead.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but it's a useful distinction, because I think vibe coding gets a bad name.
It does.
Honestly, a lot of vibe coding is fun, but not ultimately very useful, right? You can create something quickly. It's kind of fun, but you don't have much fine-grained control over how it works.
Right, actually.
And you're not going to build anything too complicated with it. If you come at it from the perspective you are, where you actually have an understanding of the tools you're using, and you're using the MCP server connected to Claude to help you come up with, like, what's the right approach, what's the right pattern to solve this particular problem, I'm imagining you're probably going to get a much more robust, reliable output than if you're just, going to a traditional vibe coding environment. And I won't name names. I don't want to pick on anyone, but yeah.
No, I mean, the vibe coding stuff is great. And I disagree with you a little bit. You can certainly get some fairly fine grained with some of this stuff, but at the end of the day, I still think you have to be an engineer. I think the tools are great if you're already an engineer and you have knowledge, and then you could take it to the next level, and you iterate a lot faster. You can tweak the code a lot faster. You can get more, you could do a lot more faster, but you still need to be an engineer to dive into the code and really make the last 10% work well.
You just missed the opportunity to say your catchphrase. It's becoming your catchphrase.
Oh, which one? I forgot.
A fool with a tool.
Oh, a fool with a tool is still a fool. Yes, exactly. A fool with a tool is still a fool.
Yes. You heard it here. We need like a sound effect when Peter says
That's my favorite one.
Next time I'm going to have like a little chime that goes off every time Peter says
which is at least twice every
like
podcast.
4 podcasts in a row.
And I will continue using it. That's my favorite, one of my favorite terms.
Oh, man. I need a catchphrase. I don't know.
You got a catch shirt.
Okay, I have a catch luck. All right, that'll work. No, it's really interesting to see, like, when people are using tools like N8N in a commercial setting. Obviously, Snowflake has been pretty accepted by the enterprise.
Right.
N8N is so interesting. I think it's so powerful, but it's neat to see people using it in an actual like commercial setting.
Are big organizations using N8N? Because I thought it was kind of limited to smaller and mid-sized companies and not the bigger enterprise orgs.
So, I mean, I don't have insight into what they're doing, but based on everything I've experienced, I doubt it.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised.
And they lean on other tools out there like Snowflake and or Databricks or something else that's out there.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And part of it, to be honest, is there is I alluded to this earlier, but you've got a fixed cost base in an IT department, and you need to keep those resources busy. And so the idea of I could spin something up with the N8N quickly is not necessarily a win for a lot of IT managers, because they've got a team and they need to have that team working.
They need that empire.
Yeah. Oh, they need the, I guess I didn't. You said that this time. I didn't say that, but yeah. I
All right. In this case, send your complaints to Erik. No.
You're absolutely right. No, but it's true. And I think a lot of IT organizations are under pressure, a lot of pressure. And I think they do maintain a level of control for a number of different reasons. And that innovative cycle just doesn't happen in, I think, most traditional organizations.
Yeah. Well,
and that's more than IT. That's just an organizational issue itself.
Calcification.
Yeah. Of course. Most
enterprise.
I'm going to credit you with calcification.
Yes, that's my new word. We'll use that a lot now.
Yep. We have to pay them in quarter every time we use it. But so let's go back to like the whole nature of IT, right? Because you were saying that like a lot of the businesses that you see that are in medium-sized firms are effectively running off Excel when you get there. And you're helping them go from Excel to maybe Snowflake or something that has a little bit more structure to it, and you're cleaning up the data on the way. But is there often an IT organization, or is this something like that you continue to help them maintain? Or I'm just curious, like how does that?
Yeah, it can go both ways. So we can just build it and manage it and do that forever. Happy to do that. Or if they want to start building out their own bench of IT resources, we can help them take it over. And it's interesting. When I switched, I used to be a mechanical engineer, and then in 99 I switched to banking, and they'd hired a Big Four consulting firm to build out a reporting system for this one business area, and I took over that reporting system and modernized it, and eventually handed it off to a central reporting team. So I think that kind of work is what can help up and coming employees make their mark. They can take over something that we built, and then you have something that works. Expand upon it.
It gives them a good foundation to build upon, and they can I mean, it's funny because Peter and I have both we're trying to like deprogram ourselves, because we've come out of environments where end user computing, EUC, was like a bad word.
Oh, it was a horrible word.
And IT departments spent a lot of time and energy trying to corral and shut down.
Oh, they worked hard at it.
Computing.
Oh, was that shadow IT?
Shadow IT.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's called shadow IT. No, now it's called shadow IT. But look, every end user wants some control to do what they want to do.
Right. And look, at the end of the day, I can't deny there are risks to end user computing, right? Like if you are doing things in a casual way, you might have security risks or reliability risks or whatever.
Right.
But I mean, we're all old enough to remember that there was a period of time not too long ago when IT departments also said the only people writing code in a large organization should be programmers in the IT department.
Right.
That stopped with the advent of Python.
Exactly. And that's going to now get further eroded with all the tools that are out there.
Right. I mean, how many people sitting at a trading desk are writing Python or R or something else?
Not a lot of traders, no.
No, but
there's a handful. But
there's a lot of people working side by side with the traders who are doing analytics at the point of consumption.
Right. Exactly.
Not waiting for IT to generate the analytics they're looking for. So I don't know. I look at what's happening with AI, and I wonder if we're sort of still seeing that same paradigm, which is like, on some hand, we talk to clients where IT wants to own AI.
I know.
And yet, in many cases, the real applicability is for the business to own it, deploy it, build solutions, etc.
Well, and I think the problem is that fool with the tool concept, that you get these people and they think they it seems like they know what they're doing, and then they end up doing something that's
but I think
regrettable.
I'm sorry. No.
Well, yeah, it's just then people say, oh no, we can't have this anymore. No more. They overreact.
Right. Sometimes. One thing goes wrong and they're like, all right, we're locking down the keys, and no one gets to play with data anymore.
Right.
But I do think as we look at like agentic AI, which is something we talk about all the time, like the very nature of agents is, to me, is that they are created by business users to automate tasks that business users
Right.
understand deeply. And so, yeah, you want technology people and team members involved in it to make sure you have the right environment, the right infrastructure.
Absolutely, yes.
But it doesn't feel like the kind of project you're going to insource to your IT department. It seems like the kind of thing
Right.
that you're going to create as a business user. And yet I can see IT in the background, like, sharpening the pitchforks and lighting the torches, going, it's end user computing.
Well, there was a term, I don't hear it much, but they're type 1 IT and type 2 IT.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. I'm
Yeah.
sure you had mentioned it the last time we spoke.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, what are those?
so type 1, yeah, that's kind of the daily, care and feeding of systems that are in place. And then type 2 is developing new capabilities that solve problems
Right.
that aren't being solved right now.
Yeah.
And I think having that mix and then being able to migrate the type 2 solutions over to that kind of type 1 environment
interesting.
over time.
So
Yeah.
what are you seeing typically out there with the smaller organizations, type 1, type 2, some mix? I would think most of them
Yeah.
are just kind of in caretaker mode. They're not highly innovative. They're not looking to be innovative. They
Right.
just want to keep their lights on.
Right. Well, I think they're run, the sales team is calling the shots at that point.
Right.
And so everything else is just to support the ability to generate revenue. Whereas, these larger enterprise organizations, the IT and other departments that are not sales
Right.
kind of have a lot more influence and
Yeah.
maybe it's not a great thing all the time.
No, it's amazing. Like, obviously it varies industry by industry, but you see so often like finance controls a lot of spending,
Right.
or the risk organization in financial services controls
right.
an awful lot of technology spend. Really interesting. So what would you, if you were talking to a business leader at someone in your target market, right?
Right.
A mid-sized firm, what kind of advice would you give them around thinking about AI and what they should be trying to do to adopt AI? Like, what do
Sure.
if they say, Erik, we're stuck, where do we start? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I think being able to pull all your disparate data into a single source of the truth, that's the thing you need.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that doesn't really mean much to a business owner
Right.
in my target market. So, you need that. And by doing that, you can automate the delivery of these final, sets of spreadsheets that your finance team uses.
Right.
And, that's one of the things that we really want to make clear to our clients is that getting started with us, you don't have to learn anything because you're just getting rid of the crappy
Right.
work you didn't want to do in the first place. And
Right.
then the end result are spreadsheets that you already know how to use
Right.
today.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
And then from there, we can get more complicated. You could there's that reverse ETL that
Yep.
you're using to do outbound marketing, with your, that single source of truth.
I think a lot of organizations just don't fully appreciate how much time and money they actually are already spending fixing all that data, because they're not fixing it in one place, putting it into one relational database. They're fixing it in 100 places, going into 100 different spreadsheets.
Yes.
And so they're doing all this redundant fixing and patching and kludging all over the place.
Right.
And then what makes it even worse is they're getting inconsistent representations of that data, back to that single source of truth concept, right? Because if you've got 100 people integrating data sets,
Right.
they're not doing it the same way. They're coming up with 105 different flavors of that data at the end of the day. And it's just a sprawl of data. And I guess people don't really understand
Oh, no.
how much it drags their productivity down when they're doing that.
I ran a data warehouse application a long time ago, and it was literally 5,000 files there was the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary recipients of this information. And I used to get the call from the tertiary ones, this is broken. What? I have no idea. And then try to feed that back so that it wouldn't break again every single time. And the complexity of that, and like over 100 teams would get all this information. And we're talking about millions and millions of records every single night. And the cost of fixing all these problems and, people identifying, and then they never knew where it got broken in the chain because it was invariably the first or second that broke the third.
Right.
And the cost was through the roof, and time and complexity to fix these problems. And this was a risk system.
And I always used to say, somewhat jokingly, but also seriously, that the number one way for organizations to figure out where to get data when they're starting a new report, new analytic process, whatever they're doing, it's the phone a friend network.
Yeah.
right?
Oh, of
There's
course.
no official way to go find it. You
Absolutely.
phone a friend who works in the finance department or a friend who works in production control or wherever, and you're
Yeah.
like, hey, I need a file of this. And that person goes, oh, I'm already cutting an extract file for this guy over here. I'll just branch it and give you a copy too.
Right. Right.
And-
Always.
Right?
Yeah. Oh, that's how it worked in the bank. That's how it always worked, because you wanted to get your problem solved as quickly as possible. And there's no version of truth sitting around any place. And, IT tends to be the barrier, and it's going to take them 6 months to deliver a feed or whatever it took. So you wind up calling your friends.
I'm feeling a little bit triggered by all this.
I know.
It's
That's how
like,
it is. Well,
that's how I used to spend my time.
Oh, you and I both.
Ooh.
Let me ask you a question, though. Does an org ever come to you and say, look, we're really looking to embrace artificial intelligence. We recognize that it's our future. We get it. Well, we get it as much as we can get it, but our data is just a complete disaster. And we know we need help with that. So can we start this journey? Or it's just the finance folks are like, I got this messy data in Excel and I just need it cleaned up.
More the latter at this point.
Right.
Yeah, I think, but I do believe that the companies that can embrace AI on their internal data are going to win out over the ones that can't. And
Right.
even if you're, small to medium sized business, that doesn't have to be a constraint.
Right. Because I always think for this, look, to me, artificial intelligence, especially for small and medium sized businesses that want to grow, it's an enormous force multiplier.
Right.
And they don't really truly appreciate what it takes. But in many ways, they can get there faster than any big company can get, because they don't have the legacy and the burden and
Right.
47 layers of management and everybody trying to stop things from happening because their job is at risk.
And they can find innovative partners. They can use innovative
Exactly.
tools. Like they've got
And
every chance.
and you and I've said this a million times. It's that target market which has the most to benefit from this tech. They not that they're lagging, but they don't know what they don't know, and I feel like there's a big education gap there of what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now our key markets are private equity backed roll-ups,
Right.
Not for profits, and then alternative finance.
Right.
And all of these, it's the same problem. They get the messy data, and especially with a PE backed roll-up, they usually go in these industries that are not very well systemized.
Right. Of course.
Yeah,
Yes.
HVAC, plumbing.
Right. Right. Of course.
And so it's just a matter of, hitting them at the time when they see that, okay, if we really want to scale this thing and be able to gobble up other companies without all that wear and tear, this is what we need.
Right. You've
So
got to do the foundational work.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that we sort of hit on, which is something, Peter and I say this all the time, I'm going to it'll be on my tombstone someday, which is you cannot create any sustainable, differentiable competitive difference with AI unless you're using your own data, right? You can't just use a generic large language model and get something different than what anyone else could get.
Right.
And I don't think people are, the industry at large is still in the process of coming to grips with that. But I think that the work you do is a lot of what they need to tackle in order to even begin to be able to use their own data.
Right.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of 3 steps ahead of where I am when we arrive. But yeah, that's the whole thing is, then you can really, optimize growth in a variety of ways.
Right.
If you have the right data management, you can also acquire other entities and incorporate their data into your single source of the truth. Yeah, a lot faster.
Right.
So yeah, it's a huge opportunity, but it's a, on the one hand, it's easy for us to work with these companies because they don't have a lot of IT already, but they also don't see.
They don't see the
reason why
bigger
they don't
picture,
have-
right? They're struggling right now, and they're just trying to get rid of the immediate problem.
Right.
They're
It's
bleeding to death, and they're trying to staunch the blood.
It's the hierarchy of needs again, right?
Of course, exactly.
stop the
Right back to
pain.
Maslow. It goes back to Maslow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Actually, I think the other thing we've seen with some of the smaller organizations is they don't recognize that a lot of data they thought was unusable is now, in fact, very usable.
Right.
Let's go back to HVAC and plumbing. You're looking at blueprints. You're looking at all sorts of documents, and it's all unstructured information. And deriving information from that in the past was obviously hard.
Right.
Not so hard anymore. And I think that connection's still not there either. So you think you don't have anything, and we saw this when we first started out when we were speaking to some firms, and we're like, oh no, that's something we can absolutely use because the cost of using it has come down dramatically, and we can actually get a lot of actionable intelligence out of information that previously was very difficult to extract information from.
Right. No, that whole leveraging your unstructured data, your emails, your communications, your chat logs, your customer interaction logs, like all of that stuff, thanks to large language models, is suddenly accessible and easy to get.
Right.
And I think, to your point, most organizations probably think of their data as what sits in Excel or what sits in a relational database or what sits in an application, software as a service or an in-house application, but they're not thinking of all that other content as part of their data universe.
Yeah, that, I meant to bring up, there was an article that I wanted to discuss, was about, the loss of the job losses because of AI.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough on people coming out of school, trying to work in a, office environment. But at the same time, I think, young folks that want to get into the trades, that first of all, there's a huge need anyway. You and I know people
You're right.
From our circle that are in the trades, and they see that they need, whatever the trade is. And at the same time, the people that are running these businesses within the trades are not into tech at all. Right. And so young people could start, developing the skills to be in these trades and using IT, AI capabilities.
So I had
interesting.
And it's funny. I had a great example of this over the weekend. I was speaking to my cousin, whose husband's an electrician, actually.
Right.
And she said in the past he would lay out the blueprints on a dining room table, and he'd go through and count all the junction boxes, the wires, like all the parts he needed that adhere to code, and it was this long, arduous process. Now what does he do? Takes a picture. AI looks at the blueprint, gives him a parts list that he just now has to double check, and then matches it to code and says, well, something has to be here. There has to be a junction box here, or this is not here, or, it saves him massive amounts of time.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'm thinking.
Right, exactly. I know. And that in construction too, doing bidding on projects, all that kind of stuff is now a lot of it's getting done with AI and just becoming much more accurate.
Well, it's funny because that sort of image interpretation used to be so expensive, so hard to do. I worked a long time ago with a property and casualty insurer that was trying to take job site photos and analyze them to detect unsafe working conditions.
Right, wildly.
But it was really hard to do and is expensive, and only a very large company could afford to do it.
It was
now.
It was
your
hard.
cousin can do it.
Exactly. It was hard. It was expensive. It was not terribly accurate.
Your cousin isn't Vinny, is he?
No.
Okay.
Hey,
just wanted to check.
No, it is truly fascinating though what you're capable of doing now with somebody's tools.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impacting, I think, all trades across the board.
Yeah, and I think there's just this huge demand for skilled trades folks.
Yeah.
And so if they can add the IT and AI capabilities, they can help, these masters really do a fantastic job.
That's actually a really interesting way to think about it. Like in the past, we've always been like, you're either in IT or you're not, right? And IT is like your entirety of your job. And obviously there's different roles in IT, but what you're describing is more where like you are a tradesperson with a competency in IT. And honestly, with the tools we're talking about and the way that technology is evolving, one person could basically function part-time as the IT organization for a whole, small company.
Right.
So I like that model.
Yeah, it's become very empowering. I mean, at the banks, the database marketing team was the biggest. Sysadmins, database admins, all these different people.
Right.
You haven't even done anything yet.
Right. Hundreds of people sometimes, right? Like,
So.
I like that model.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you a more personal question, which is, what are you using these days for AI tools that you like? We've talked about a couple. I'm always curious. Like, we always like to hear what people use, what people are currently fascinated by or want to explore more, because it's changing so fast. So anything that's caught your eye lately or been useful to you?
So yeah, I mean, Claude is that's what I use the most right now,
Okay.
especially with that MCP. And then Claude, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, those are the main tools that I'm using at this point.
Any reason why one over the other, or just? The Claude MCP one I do the same thing. That's the obvious one. But I mean, Gemini versus OpenAI versus some of the other ones that are out there.
It seems Claude is seems to have more recency with the results that gives me.
Right.
But no particular one. Like right now, I have Claude Desktop installed. So
do I, exactly.
Yeah, it just feels good right now. Maybe there are better
No, I
ones,
actually love it. I mean, I use it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it has limitations, but I actually use it all the time.
Yeah.
I go back and forth all the time, and I have to admit, sometimes it's just become habit what I use for what type of task, right?
Yep,
But
yep.
but I find, for example, for writing projects, Claude is great.
Yeah, and it has better writing.
I wouldn't say that others aren't as good anymore because I haven't tested them. I got comfortable with one tool for one purpose, a different tool for a different purpose.
Yep.
Right.
And it's funny because I just, on the way here today, I read this whole article on, it went through the different types of training data used on the different types of models and then how they were reinforced subsequently. And some legitimately are just better than other things. Claude happens to be very good coding and actually professional writing.
Right.
OpenAI is something else, Gemini is something else. But, you know, Gemini's been trained on a large corpus of multimodal data. So text, images, and film and stuff like that. I'm sorry, voice and stuff like that. So they're just different at different things.
Yeah.
So there are strengths. It's not just, you know, we're making this up.
Right. And I think that it's interesting when you think about like there's differences in the core model. I won't say the architecture, but some of the details, the way they're built. There's differences in the training data. And then there's massive differences in the reinforcement learning phase and what they're optimized by humans to do.
100%, absolutely. And some of them are making changes to how they do that now too as well. And they're using a different type of approach rather than using RLHF. And so no, they're changing quite a bit how to do some of this stuff. So the models are, in fact, profoundly different.
Yeah. All right. Well, Erik, I really want to thank you. It's been fun talking to you. Thanks for joining us on Call Me Data. Any closing words, Peter?
No, I just want to thank you. Another great conversation. It was a pleasure having you today. And this was awesome.
And don't forget the phrase that pays is calcified.
Calcified.
We'll be sending you your royalty checks every time we use the phrase. But thank you.
Thanks for having me on. This was great. Really, it's my first time being on a podcast. So
yeah,
it's our time.
It is our first time in the studio.
This is our first time doing it live in the studio with three of us. This has been a different experience. So thanks for being a guinea pig, part of our experiment in doing this.
Happy to help.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much.
All right, and see you all next week on Call Me Data.
Have a great day, everybody.
Right. Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to us over on YouTube. And make sure to stay up to date with us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well.